Hello and welcome everyone to this important video where I'm going to look into an interview that Herbert did on his channel with Dan Ives. You know Dan Ives, Wedbush, the man with the most beautiful clothing on Wall Street, always sticking out. But Dan is also a very smart thinker around AI, and he has this new ETF. I think that's called Dan Ives ETF or something, Dan Ives ETF. So this is a very important analyst that is at the forefront of understanding the AI revolution, understanding shares like Tesla. And he made a very, very important point that I want to show you guys and then discuss what that actually means and why that is a very, very interesting aspect of the rally that I think might be coming for Tesla once we hit certain inflection points in robotaxi. Of course, they need to be hit first, but they could be hit very soon. So let's see what Dan has to say and see what that means for us. So here is the video, and here is what Herbert asked.
Then what percentage of institutional analysts would you say are the folks who say, I will only invest once I see earnings growth, sequential quarter after quarter growth earnings, has to like hit the bottom line, versus others who will get ahead of it and say, oh, I can now see, okay, maybe they're not quite ready today, but let's say 5 months from now, they go, okay, actually, I see them expanding cities. I see them actually remove safety monitors. I'm ready to make my bet now ahead of earnings. How do you see what percentage?
That's a great question. I'd say historically it was probably 60 to 70% needed to see it. Numbers, okay. 30% were more the visionary and they'll focus on playing the future. I think because we're in a fourth industrial revolution and because everyone knows AI is real, I think that's switched. So I don't view it as much of it. I actually view many investors want to believe, they don't want to miss it. They've, maybe in the past been skeptical and been proven wrong. And then also I think there's a view of there's a growing view within the community where it's eventually you're going to have XAI and X and Tesla in one holding structure. So
do you actually believe that? Do you think that could happen?
I believe the chance of that were 2% a year ago. The chance of that today are 30%.
Okay.
So these are two extremely important points. One is more important for our tactical considerations than the other, but let us go through it. So what did Dan say here? So Dan said, Herbert was asking, Dan, how many people, institutional investors, and Dan has exposure to many, many institutional investors. So Herbert was asking how many institutional investors need to see before they buy into that new Tesla story. How many of them need to see facts, numbers? What they mean with that is cash flow. Hey, creating these videos is a lot of work. Please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Now let's get back to the video. That means look at NVIDIA. Everyone missed it. And then NVIDIA was raking in billions, tens of billions in free cash flow. And then everyone's jumping on it. And then the stock went through the roof. So the question is, how many institutional investors are like that with Tesla, that they say, whatever, we need to see the cash rolling in and making meaningful differences in the free cash flow. And how many institutional big investors don't need to see that and are willing to jump on based on faith and belief once we have any kind of little sign. And then Dan said, well, in the past, the split was 30 something around that. 30% of investors, of big institutional investors, were willing to make that leap of faith. For example, Ron Barron, Cathie Woods, but 70% were not willing to do that. They wanted to see the dough rolling in with no doubt that this is all real. And he said, now it has switched. It has flipped. So now he says that, this is not the case anymore. And actually 60% of investors or 70% of investors would actually be willing to invest in Tesla before that is the case. And because we are in a big hype phase of, in a big hype phase of AI. I show you the Dan picture. This is good to see Dan. And you know, he's talking about this, and I think this is incredibly interesting when you think about it. Because what does it actually mean? It means that we don't need much to actually see that tsunami of institutional money coming in. This is very important to understand. Dan is not a dummy. He has intelligence, boots on the ground. He talks to the institutional investors all day long, so he knows what they're thinking, and he says it's flipped. And that means 70% of the institutional investors understand the Tesla story, believe the Tesla story, and want to believe it actually works. So what they need is just the slightest small little piece of evidence that it works. What does it mean for us? And how does it actually translate into something tradable? It means, and Dan is actually talking about this later in the video, it means that once we see any expansion of the Austin map, and once we see the second city coming in, Dan believes that is the inflection point where people say, okay, that's it, I'm in. And that can happen. And this is very important. That can happen at any point in time now. If you ask me, would I bet absolutely against this happening, that we have two cities or that we have an expansion in Austin? Would I bet against this happening in August? Absolutely not. It can absolutely happen. So we have to understand now we have another important piece of confirmation here for the thesis that this can actually happen shortly and that the institutional investors are totally in to jump into this whole situation. And that means for us, it is dangerous to not be in Tesla. And I know I had another video explaining a strategy here, you know, where we might take some Tesla off the table, go into NVIDIA because it's a nice constant uptrend here with NVIDIA in case we see a lag and in case Tesla goes up to 360 now and we think, well, you know, it takes the forcing function to kick in to actually go up. But the walls are closing in on that phase where Tesla is outside that forcing function. So I just thought I want to share this with you guys. This is a very important piece of information. 70% of these guys are willing to go all in and buy into that new thesis. And from there, it's very hard to see the limit to the upside once that dam breaks. And what makes it break? We don't know exactly, but we know everyone wants to believe it, so it won't take much. It will take the robo-taxis scaling into multiple cities. So I hope that was helpful. And the other piece of information, we will cover that in a different video. The idea that Tesla and XAI are going to merge into a super AI company. We had great discussions on Pioneerland. That Tesla and what Elon is building is actually not just Tesla. It's a global infrastructure of data intake with a centralized brain, which is XAI and some of the Tesla AI. And ultimately, these companies are probably going to merge. And I have a nice thesis why I think they will merge and when they will merge and why they will merge. It has to do with equity and control and ownership. There's I think, a smart strategy Elon has behind the scenes. And I think that merger would be very beneficial for everyone if it's done right. And Dan mentioned in this video here too, that in his mind, the odds for that happening went up from 2% to 30%. And why is this important for robotaxi and everything else? It tells you that everyone is super bullish and excited and has a lot of fantasies going on in their minds. What is happening with Tesla and how it's transforming into this super giga AI company, which means institutional investors are ready to buy into that story once we give them any piece of meat. So now you know my theory here. The institutions are building up a giant tsunami. Once the dam breaks, this thing is not going to stop anytime soon. So it's our job to anticipate when it breaks and what the trigger for that dam break will be. So stay tuned. I hope that was helpful and see you very soon.